One does not explain greatness. One tries to attune oneself to it. It remains true that, for us, Joan is above all the saint of reconciliation, the one whom, whatever be our personal convictions, we admire and love, because overriding all partisan points of view, each one of us can find in himself a reason to love her. That is an excerpt from the book I want to talk to you about today, titled Joan of Arc, By Herself and Her Witnesses, by Regine Pernoud. It is written by a French author and translated from French, so there will be several words that I do my best to pronounce, but that I will do poorly at, so please give me grace on that. It is a unique biography in the fact that it is fundamentally based on the direct writings and commentary from people that lived during Joan's lifetime, so the 1400s, those that knew her in her village, and the words of Joan herself actually in letters that she dictated because she couldn't read or write, and then ultimately directly from the trial that she underwent, in which scribes recorded everything. So it's a really unique look, and it reads like a first-hand account of her trial and her life. And several of the quotations I'll pull from the book are read in the first person, and that is because they're recorded firsthand from the people that are giving an account of her life and their life at the time. And when Joan makes a statement and it is followed with a question, that indicates that it's from the trial and they're going back and forth. So first, let's understand some of the historical context that Joan of Arc is born into. So she's born in 1412 in a small village called Domremy in northeast France. Joan is born during the Hundreds-Year War between England and France. Fundamentally, it was fought over English claims to land in France and the English claim to the French throne. Joan, of course, is French and is a symbol of French nationality and sovereignty, and believes it is her divine calling to drive the English out of France, peacefully or otherwise. So that's the backdrop in which we'll approach the story and everything moving forward for the rest of the episode. So back to the book here. Joan was baptized at the Church of St. Remy and was a faithful Catholic, knew her prayers, went to Mass, went to confession, and received the Eucharist. I was brought up with Joan, the maid next door to her father's house. I knew that she was good, simple, pious, fearing God and his saints. She went often and of her own will to church and to sacred places, caring for the sick and giving alms to the poor. This I saw myself, for when I was a child, I myself was sick, and Joan came to comfort me. Her former parish priest said that she was a good Catholic and that he had never met a better and had none better in his parish. So the first part of this book is filled with countless accounts like these, that she was simple, hardworking, honest, God-fearing, and faithful. However, this is not what makes her a saint ultimately. It's that she has this distinct and clear mission that has been put on her heart, and we'll discover it here as we go back to the book. When I was 13 years old, I had a voice from God to help me govern my conduct, and the first time I was very fearful. And came this voice, about the hour of noon in the summertime in my father's garden. I had not fasted on the preceding day. I heard the voice on the right-hand side towards the church, and rarely do I hear it without a brightness. This brightness comes from the same side as the voice is heard. It is usually a great light. When I came to France, often I heard this voice. This voice was sent to me by God, and after I heard this voice, I knew that it was the voice of an angel. This voice has always guarded me well, and I have always understood it clearly. What sort of help, say you, that this voice has brought you for the salvation of your soul? It has taught me to conduct myself well and to habitually go to church. It told me that I, Joan, should come into France. This voice told me twice or thrice a week that I, Joan, must go away and that I must come to France and that my father must know nothing of my leaving. The voice told me that I should go to France and I could not bear to stay where I was. It told me that I should raise the siege laid to the city of Orleans. It told me that I should make my way to Robert de Baudricourt in the fortress of Vaucouleurs, the captain of that place, that he would give me people to go with me. And me, I answered that I was a poor girl, who knew not how to ride nor lead in war. When I came to this town, I recognized Robert, when never before had I seen him, and by my voice I knew this Robert, for the voice told me that it was him. I told this same Robert that I must go into France. This Robert refused and repelled me. Although I would rather have remained spinning at my mother's side, for it was not my condition, yet must I go, and must I do this thing, for my Lord wills that I do so. Robert asked her who was her Lord. She answered, the King of Heaven. So this immediately reminded me of some of the other people you and I have read about so far. Of course, it's more supernatural, but when John Paul II felt his first calling to the priesthood, his friends stayed up all night trying to convince him otherwise. When Solanus Casey was attempting to pursue the Capuchin order, he was dismissed from seminary several times. Joan, in this same way, is pursuing God's will for her and her life, and is refused and is repelled from this several times, but she refused to let this deter her from her mission. This dogged determination is how we must pursue God's will in our own lives, because we've learned from the handful of saints that we've explored so far, they pursued their mission and God's will with this same dogged determination, and so must we. So back to the book. Ultimately, Robert is convinced of her mission and gives her the necessary resources to get to the Dauphin, who she wants to be made the rightful king of France. When I entered my king's room, I knew him among the others by the counsel of my voice, which revealed him to me. I told my king that I wanted to go and make war against the English. When he knew that she had been examined, and it was reported to him that they had found nothing but what was good in her, the king had arms made for her, and entrusted her to his men of war, and she was given command in the matter of war. The king told those who were present that Joan had told him certain secrets that none knew or could know, excepting only God. That is why he had great confidence in her. Now Joan and her allies set out to drive the English out of several towns before reaching their destination, where they intend to coronate the king. In writing to the English not wishing to attack, Joan says, "You Englishmen have no right in this kingdom of France. The King of Heaven orders and commands you through me, Joan, the maid, that you quit your fortresses and return into your country. This is what I write to you for the third and last time, and shall write no more." In this assault, Joan was struck by an arrow above the breast. Some soldiers, seeing her so wounded, wanted to apply a charm to her wound, but she would not have it, saying, "I would rather die than do a thing which I know to be a sin or against the will of God." So they want to apply a charm. I think what they're saying here is like some sort of spell. People were very supernatural and superstitious back then. And Joan refuses it because she's faithful. I think it is also extremely important to note here that Joan is not seeking war and does not take joy in having to fight the English. I think it's really easy to glorify the things she did because it was so amazing, and it was a mission that was so holy in nature because of where she was taking her inspiration. But she does everything in her power to exercise caution and prudence, giving the English every opportunity to leave the city. This is super important. And several times throughout the book and her campaign, we see Joan weeping at the English dead and asking that the priests traveling with them hear the dying's confessions and ensure that they're given their last rites. So ultimately, Joan and her allies raise the siege of Orleans and drive the English out. They take several more towns and ultimately achieve their mission of crowning the king at the city Rheims. However, with a significant part of their mission accomplished, Joan now has a revelation that she was going to be captured, and in a battle following, Joan entered into the melee and was captured. This is where the corruption and the trial begins, ultimately lasting 5 months from January 9th to May 30th, 1431. This next quotation here sums up the trial well. "In theory, Joan was judged by the church in a matter of heresy, In point of fact, she was simply a prisoner of war whose fate depended on the English government. So the corruption of the trial is immediately apparent as their questions seek to trap and incriminate her. Some examples of this: her confessor while in jail is an informant. After a man is sent to gain firsthand accounts of what Joan is like from people in her hometown, he finds nothing but honest accounts of her being good, and the bishop ignores this evidence and actually accuses the man of being a traitor. And so really fundamentally what they're seeking to accuse her of is heresy, that she's hearing voices. They initially start the trial as her being a witch, but it moves into heresy, that she's rejecting God and the church and his teaching, which is, of course, not the case, as we'll see. And in the trial, we're able to see a bit into Joan's personality and some of the tenacity she possesses. This is a quote directly from her. "Thou hast said that the voice told thee that God wishes to deliver the people of France from the calamities which afflict it. If he wishes to deliver it, it is not necessary to have men at arms. Then Joan answered him, By God, the men at arms will do battle, and God will give victory. I asked her what language the voice spoke. She answered, Better than yours. And again, I asked her if she believed in God. She answered me, Yes, better than you." So she clearly has some fire in her and is not afraid to say what she thinks. Some first-hand accounts of the trial describe it as, "I heard it said that she answered with so much prudence that if certain doctors of the church had been questioned as she was, they would have hardly answered so well." So many thought the trial should have been escalated to the Pope, and Joan herself directly asked this, as she continually says, "I will always submit myself to the judgment of the Pope and the Church," and that she wishes to be taken directly to him. And this is her saying this in the trial: "I trust in God, my Creator, and I love him with all my heart." However, this is ultimately denied, and Joan is pronounced guilty in May of 1431, and they deliver her sentence with, "She is found guilty of being a schismatic, an apostate, a liar, a soothsayer, a suspect of heresy, of erring in the faith, and being a blasphemer of God and the saints." In response, she maintains, "The way that I have always spoken and held to in this trial, that will I still maintain. And if I was brought to judgment and saw the fire lit and the executioner ready to stoke the fire, and that I be within the fire, yet should I not say otherwise, and maintain what I have said in the trial, even unto death." So as they're preparing her execution in the town square, this is her talking to someone near her. "She begged me as I was near her at the end that I would go to the nearby church and fetch the cross to hold it raised right before her eyes until the threshold of death, that the cross which God hung upon her continually before her eyes in her lifetime. She was at once taken to the fire, and in the fire she cried more than 6 times, 'Jesus,' and above all, with her last breath, she cried in a loud voice, 'Jesus,' so that all present could hear her. Almost all wept with pity." So this is difficult to even comprehend. The courage and strength that it must have taken to not be consumed, absolutely consumed by hate and anger, that you are going to be executed in one of the most painful ways possible, and unjustly so, by a corrupt trial, those seeking to convict you, is almost unimaginable. And then to not turn on the church either. She trusted in Jesus until the end, despite being persecuted by a corrupt member of the church. And I think it gives us a window into who she was, that in her own suffering, that as she knew she was going to be executed in this horrible way, she wanted to have her eyes on the cross. She wanted to have her eyes on Jesus, knowing the sacrifice that he has already made for her. Immediately after the execution, the executioner came to me and my companion, struck and moved to a marvelous repentance and terrible contrition, all in despair, fearing never to obtain pardon and indulgence from God for what he had done to that saintly woman, and affirmed This said executioner, that despite the oil, the sulfur, and the charcoal, which he applied against Joan's entrails and heart, nevertheless he had not by any means been able to consume nor reduce the ashes, the entrails, nor the heart, which he was greatly astonished as by a manifest miracle. So an inquiry is ordered for the king and the Holy See, and just 25 years after her death, the church officially declared her innocent and a martyr, and that her trial was conducted with political motivation and by corrupt officials. This, of course, tells us everything we need to know, that the majority of people likely at the time knew that it was unjust, and that for only 25 years to go by for the church to declare her innocent and a martyr, that the church knew it as well once it was escalated. So it's very clear that this was a corrupt official and a corrupt trial. Joan was beatified on April 18th, 1909, and canonized as saint on May 9th, 1920. July 10th is Joan's feast day, and it was declared a national holiday in France. So that is where I will leave it for now. This book was truly unique and a joy to read. It was as if you were reading from a book that was written in the 20th or 21st century with quotations from people that were still alive. It was really cool. There's much more that I do not cover here, with many more details of her exploits and direct quotes from Joan herself, but really what I wanted to do was highlight some of the heroic virtue that she exemplified and how we can learn from that. So if you would like to purchase the book for yourself, use the link that is in the description, and you will be supporting the podcast at the same time. Thank you, and Deo gratias.